Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I am happy to be here with you today as we discuss a very interesting and unique piece of breaking news. As you may have just learned about, there has been a new development in the White House that will be affecting the United States and South America. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But first, if this is the first time that you're seeing the channel, we want to welcome you and thank you for joining us. We do long-form political commentary on the channel. And every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, on DLive, on all social media that the internet overlords will allow us to share in an expression of the First Amendment and talking with you directly about the issues that matter to you and affect the entire world. And we invite an audience from everywhere in the world to join us every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to share your voice on the issues that matter as an expression of free speech. Now to the issue at hand today, because we have just found out that Kamala Harris will be going to the southern border of the United States. This is a first. It's something she has not done as vice in the Biden administration. It's something that we have seen repeatedly downplayed throughout the entire process. But let's really understand the importance of what has happened and why it is happening now. So to start off with, we know that back on March 24th, Joe Biden tapped Kamala Harris to be in charge of the southern border. That's because there was a crisis at our southern border. To be very clear, we have a massive inflow of illegal aliens. And again, not undocumented immigrants because they're not invited into the United States. They don't have documentation authorizing them to be in the United States. These aren't undocumented workers, again, no authorization to be in the United States. These are, by legal definition, illegal aliens, individuals who have broken the law and continue to break the law to be in the United States. And there was a massive inflow of children, minors, unattended, being sent over multi-thousand-mile marches through a desert, along with sex traffickers and drug gangs, to enter the United States by themselves. And we saw over 16,000 of them come to the United States immediately after Joe Biden had gained office. So it was in March 24th, in response to the child abuse, the rampant child abuse that we saw happening at the southern border of the United States, that Joe Biden decided there was what he called a challenge, what the news media called a challenge at the border. In other words, a crisis, an unprecedented number of children and illegal alien adults trying to enter the United States. And so Kamala Harris was chosen, as the AP had reported on March 24th, that she will be the one delegating and dealing with this. In fact, they say, in quote, in delegating the matter to Harris, Biden is seeking to replicate a dynamic that played out when he served as President Barack Obama's vice president. Obama turned to Biden in his first term to lead the White House effort to draw down U.S. troops in Iraq and oversee implementation of the stimulus in response to the Great Recession. Well, we all know how well that went because troops are still overseas and in Iraq as of this day. From 2009, and here we are in 2021, troops are still in Iraq. In fact, Joe Biden is sending more troops to Syria and increasing the instability in the Middle East. We also see that the stimulus plan, if we all may remember the summer of recovery in 2010, the entire plan failed. Not because a Republican says it, not because conservatives think that, but because economists, in looking at the stimulus plan from 2009, 2010, it failed. In looking at the cash for clunkers, it failed. This is what Joe Biden was in charge of, and the American economy failed under his guidance under the Obama administration. But he's hoping that Kamala Harris will do better. And we can only hope that she would. But we should make sure that we understand that the Biden administration believes that it's not their fault for inviting illegal aliens into the United States. They say in this article from the AP, Biden suggested that President Donald Trump's decision to cut $450 million in funding in 2019 to the region partly was for the blame of the increase in illegal immigration, which is a kind of dumb thing to say. Oops, come on. And the reason why that's such a dumb thing to say is very simply because it's not true. If the funding from the Trump administration being restricted, being reduced to South American and Central American countries, if that were actually the cause of people coming into the United States, why did they wait more than a year to actually come to the United States? Because the immigration surplus didn't happen in 2020 as it could have. It didn't happen on January 1st. It happened after Joe Biden had taken power on January 21st. We didn't see the inflow of children and illegal alien adults until February, well into February. That's when we saw the inflow. They timed it perfectly because of Joe Biden and his policies, a return to the Obama-era policies, not the Trump administration cutting funding to South American countries. The timing is explicit on this. Now, also in March, we saw that this wasn't just the AP talking about what was going on, that it wasn't just a challenge, but a crisis. And the news media went to great lengths to downplay the significance in the wording and to emphasize the empathy coming from the Biden administration, as you can see here with ABC News, as they reported at the time.
Next, the situation at the border and the worsening humanitarian toll. ABC News has learned that over the last month, an average of 5,000 unauthorized immigrants have been stopped daily, and the number of unaccompanied minors continues to grow. Reporters still not allowed into the severely overcrowded facilities. These images released by a group of Republican senators who visited. The political fallout only heating up. More now from ABC's White House correspondent Mary Alice Parks.
Tonight, thousands of migrants desperately making their way to the southern U.S. border, risking their lives. Some seen walking with young children, other children seen traveling alone.
Okay. This is ABC News telling us. They've made it very clear that, well, as you heard them, it's a border emergency, not a crisis, not a challenge. It was an emergency. Well, when 5,000 illegal aliens show up at the border every day for a month, well, that's a bit more than just an emergency. That's a crisis. That is epidemic levels of incursion, of violation of the United States law and United States sovereignty. We would consider that a crisis. In fact, in every single administration prior to the Biden administration, it was called a crisis. But under the Biden administration, it's now called a challenge or an emergency, meant to deflate the significance of this issue and the amount of child abuse that's going on. As we're told, children, this is ABC News that just told you, children by themselves, unaccompanied minors, have been sent on 1,000-mile treks, and they're not all making it. And that's a problem, because that is child abuse. Now, you would expect that that kind of child abuse would be something that would be addressed by the Democratic Party. We are told constantly that the Democratic Party is there to represent minorities and those who are not being paid attention to, that don't have the biggest voice in our government. That would include illegal aliens. That's why in 2020, during the election, the Democratic Party placed themselves as the champions of undocumented workers, in other words, illegal aliens. So what was their response to thousands of children suffering child abuse being sent to the border of the United States? Nothing. They did nothing. We received, as you saw from ABC News, images from Senator Ted Cruz, among other members of Congress, showing overcrowded cages, the very cages that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was angry about during the Trump administration that were created under the Obama administration. Those cages were filled to the gills with children, many of them suffering from COVID, as we have covered on this channel before. And yet, the Democrats did nothing. In fact, in May 23rd, we were speaking about this a little bit on our weekly Sunday live stream. And we were saying at the time, I'm saying that a lot. That's the theme of the show today. Who's running this thing? Who's trying to put this in our way? Because they are deceiving us. They are hiding things from us. Let me ask you, how many people realize that on May 19th, the Biden administration was caught shipping illegal alien children into Chattanooga? Did you know that? And I think most Americans didn't know that. And to this day, they have not been told that. It was not a focus of the news media. The national news media ignored the story, that up until May 19th, if not continuing to this day on June 23rd, the Biden administration has been taking children from the southern border and in the middle of the night shipping them out to other states and having other states take care of those children so as to limit and reduce the number of children at the southern border. This is part of the reason why the southern border and the U.S. facilities holding the children and the illegal immigrants is off limits to the press. To this day, in June, of a problem that started in February. And yet, we see news media didn't touch this. They didn't talk to the public about the fact that children are arriving in late nights. This is WRCB-TV. It's NBC News. And NBC would not take the story from their local affiliate and pass it on to the rest of the public. So you have to ask the question, why did they do that? Why did they ignore this? Why is it the Democrats were ignoring this story and not telling people what's going on? Well, what did happen is that in June, we heard Kamala Harris say she was going to take some action. She was going to go to Guatemala, and she was going to talk to the Guatemalan government, telling them not to send any more children, any more illegal immigrants to the United States. And that was a trip, by the way, to go from Washington, D.C. to get to Guatemala City is a trip of 3,060 miles. In fact, if the vice president, if Kamala Harris wanted to drive this, it would have taken her 54 hours. She flew. But the thing that's really important here is to get to Guatemala City, you have to pass the southern border of the United States. You have to. And you're either going to enter either through Texas or through California. But you still have to get in, or Arizona to be exact. But most are entering through Texas or California. And to get there, you have to get through the southern border. Kamala Harris had to take a determined effort to fly over the United States border to get to Guatemala City. It wasn't just accidental. It was something she had to see and had to plan around to avoid it. And that's why when she came back from that trip, which was a failure because the immigration crisis at the southern border continues to exist. Children are continuing to be sent to the United States. When she came back, she was asked about this by Lester Holt of NBC News. Well, let's see what that was. What did she say when Lester Holt of NBC News asked her a question?
Okay.
Do you have any plans to visit the border?
I'm here in Guatemala today. At some point, we are going to the border. We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
Okay. No one in the Biden administration has been to the border. Ted Cruz was at the border. Members of Congress, including Congresswoman Claudia Tenney, were at the border. Democrats did not go to the border. The Biden administration did not go to the border. And as Lester Holt just pointed out, Kamala Harris did not go to the border. They have avoided it directly. What else does Lester Holt and Kamala Harris have to say to each other?
I haven't been to Europe. And I don't understand the point that you're making. I'm not discounting the importance of the border.
Well,
Yes, she is meaning to discount the importance of the border. Because she did understand the question. The question was very simple and very direct. Kamala Harris, you haven't been to the southern border. And we don't have people coming from Europe across the American border. You can't do that. There's an ocean in the way. But we do have people who are crossing the southern border, which is why she was in Guatemala City. And she can't see the importance of that. She can't see the importance of children, tens of thousands of children, being sent by themselves to cross thousands of miles and a desert to get into the United States. She doesn't see the importance of that. She doesn't see the importance of going to check on these children that are in cages, as described by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, that were created by the Obama administration, where children are packed, according to ABC News, packed together in these cages, and they have COVID. A crisis, we are told, is so bad we had to shut down our economy and the global economy. And that's not a crisis. That's not important. That's not something worthy of going to visit and check out. I mean, it's really stunning. And if in case you didn't believe her words, here it is again. She says, at some point, and this is according to CNN Politics covering the story, at some point, we are going to the border. We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we have been to the border. We've been to the border, which is a lie. Holt responded, you haven't been to the border. And her answer is, I haven't been to Europe. And I don't understand the point that you're making. Again, we didn't take anything out of context in what she said, and we showed you that clip. And when you read those words, as well as listening to her voice as she laughs, is this the party of compassion that we were told about in 2020? Is this the compassion and effort and interest in illegal aliens that we were told about on the campaign trail in 2020? Is this the party that's there to defend? What is it that would make them go forward? Because again, from March, when Kamala Harris was put in charge of this, she never went to the border. This is an issue that had started in February under the Biden administration, and only the Biden administration. It didn't happen under the Trump administration. So this issue went on for months, and we've had Republicans, We have members of Congress. We have had some elements of the news media, like Lester Holt, asking over and over again, when are you going to go to the southern border? The answer we got was not quite the answer that was expected from the far left news media. The answer we received is former President Trump stated he is going to go to the U.S.-Mexico border with the Texas governor. As was stated on June 15th, after Kamala Harris had gone to Guatemala City, after the failed policies of the Biden administration to address the crisis at our southern border, finally, an executive of the United States government, former President Donald Trump, stated that he was going to go to Texas, to the southern border with Texas Governor Greg Abbott. Makes it as clear as you can go. Now, there is a 2,000 kilometer or 1,250 mile border. They didn't say which part, but they did say they were going to go. And as we saw, also reported on June 15th by New York Post, they're going to go on, and they told us exactly the day, June 30th. Former President Trump announced that he's going to the U.S.-Mexico border with Texas Governor Greg Abbott, and that they plan to go on June 30th. So the Biden administration couldn't make it to the southern border. Kamala Harris made it to Seoul. She went to South Korea. We saw that Joe Biden went to the G7 summit over in Europe. Neither of them could figure out how to get to the southern border. That's really impressive in the worst kind of way. And it took for any attention to go to a crisis affecting children. Again, we cannot emphasize enough. This is child abuse that is going on at a massive scale. Something that we hear from Democrats being a major issue for them, child abuse. They absolutely say this is one of the things they're concerned about and one of their policy imperatives. And it took former President Trump before anyone in the White House and the Democratic Party would actually acknowledge the crisis. And we were told an exact date that this would happen.
If the U.S. Latino population were measured in terms of a country.
And so we were actually given a time frame. And this is important. And we know that not only was President Trump going to go to the southern border, but then we found out that House Republicans were going to join him, that members of Congress were going to join him at the southern border on June 30th. Of those, including Representative Jim Banks, amongst others. Now, this is important. So the issue had gone from not only a humanitarian issue of trying to save children, not only a legal issue stemming a violation of the United States sovereignty and our laws, it's gone from that, and then also an issue of our finances and our economy because of the $300 billion that was going to be spent by the Biden administration to Guatemala and to some of the El Salvador and some of the other Central and South American countries. So it went from that to becoming a political event. It became political not because the former president was going, but that members of Congress who will be seeking office in the 2022 midterm elections were going to the border. And that means Democrats would look bad. Democrats would not be able to say that the Biden administration has held up the United States law and also the very same humanitarian heartbeat and outreach that we've been told that they support. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back, because Kamala Harris then decided, after knowing the deadline, that she's now going to the going down to the southern border of the United States on June 25th. In fact, it was reported today, June 23rd, that Kamala Harris is going to go to the border. What a shocking development. It only took her from March until June 25th, after being embarrassed by members of Congress, after being embarrassed by members of the press, after failing with foreign governments. Now she's going to go, and the only reason why she's going is because of President Trump and the 2022 elections. You may say, Mike, well, you're reaching there. How do you know that for sure? As reported by Politico, Harris and her team have repeatedly pushed back against the criticism that neither she nor Joe Biden have gone to visit the U.S.-Mexico border, arguing that she, Kamala Harris, is more focused on tackling the destabilizing conditions that are causing thousands of migrants from Central America to head to the border seeking refuge. That's a bit of a long sentence there, which is incorrect in part. But more importantly, she said, no, she's focused on this. She's working on this. It's having no impact. She has failed because it hasn't stemmed the tide. They're still coming to the United States, and the numbers haven't changed, so she failed. But they go on to say, that was the central message during her first foreign trip, a 2-day visit to Mexico and Guatemala earlier this month. While there, Harris met with local officials and implored migrants not to make the journey across Mexico into the United States, which didn't work. It was a complete failure. Here's the part that's interesting, though. Her trip, however, was complicated by continued questions over whether she would go to the border to view the situation there. Harris's response, in which she downplayed the need and noted that she also hadn't visited Europe, which makes no sense and is useless, only amplified the criticism. Harris's border visit comes just days before former President Donald Trump is set to travel to the border, where he will be joined by Texas GOP Governor Greg Abbott and a group of House Republicans. That's the thing that made the difference. She didn't care that there were illegal aliens going into the United States. She didn't care that there were children who were being abused, being sent on 1,000-mile treks by themselves without food or clothing or health care, that they were being abused by sex traffickers and drug gangs. She didn't care about that. She wouldn't go to the border for that. She went overseas, she went to another country, but she wouldn't go to the United States border. She didn't respond when it was pointed out by news media, local news media, that the Biden administration is shipping children away from the border to try and lessen the impact that is happening there to make it look like less of a crisis. And yet, she still would not go. She still has done nothing. No benefit has happened for those children or the United States government. But merely mention politics, mention the fact that President Trump and Texas governor, which the Politico had to mention was a GOP representative, and to also mention that House Republicans were going down there, well, that means the 2022 election will focus on the southern border, that immigration, a hot button issue, will be pointed out. And her refusal to go to the border, to have no positive impact, to be useless, as is the Biden administration, that would affect voting in the 2022 election. And that made her go. And that's why she's going to show up before President Trump. In fact, they said in this article, shortly after the news of Harris's visit began circulating, Trump released a statement claiming that if he and Abbott weren't going there next week, she would never have gone. It's about as straightforward as you can make it. It's the truth. She had no intent. She's had months. She's traveled overseas. Joe Biden has traveled overseas. They have had months to go down to the southern border to see what they are preventing you to learn about, preventing news media from reporting on, and that members of Congress have snuck in and gotten images of that we did see. We know there's a crisis, and they're only now deciding to address it because of politics. Because Orange Man Bad is going, and Orange Man Bad is bringing a bunch of Republicans with him, and they are trying to do something that Democrats don't care about. And that means Democrats might lose the 2022 midterm elections. And that's the reason why. They don't care about the money. They don't care about the people. They don't care about the law. They care about election. I've just walked you through the entire process from March until June 23rd. And I've shown you the left-wing news media's best. Lester Holt, looking at Politico, looking at ABC News. They're telling you, it's clear. There is no concern. Not about the people, not about the issue. It's about the politics. It's about an election. You may not agree with us on our reasoning. You may not want to be a Republican or a conservative. That's fine. But it should concern every single American citizen that the only thing that creates actual action, that only actually motivates the Biden administration and Kamala Harris is politics. That is the lowest bar possible and the worst reason possible. We should have an executive branch that is more motivated, more dedicated, and more effective. But maybe you think we're wrong. Maybe you think we've misunderstood. Maybe you think that we haven't included all information that is available from the left-wing media about the southern border. Maybe you think that we have somehow misunderstood the actual evidence and reporting that we've shown you. Please, do let us know. Comment. Leave us a message in the comments telling us why you think we may have gotten it wrong. Tell us why you think that Kamala Harris is doing this that isn't a political reason. We look forward to hearing your thoughts on this and what else might be able to motivate the Biden administration and Kamala Harris to better preserve the United States government, the laws of the United States government, and to help the rest of the world. We look forward to hearing what you have to say about that. And as always, if you have found this to be informative or interesting, please do like and share. And most of all, please do subscribe so that we can continue to have this discussion, this expression of the First Amendment. And join us every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for you to directly speak with us every Sunday. We thank you, and we look forward to speaking to you again soon.